Well, welcome everyone to the 2021 Go Virtual Career Pathways Conference. I'm Jewel Alderson-Clark with the San Diego County Office of Education. We are so excited to have you here. This year, our theme is CTE in the Age of Disruption. Because the last year and a half, it's ever changing and it continues to change day to day, depending on your system and what's happening in your classrooms. But at the same time, I think a lot of us are concerned that we don't want our classrooms to go back to being exactly how they were before things have changed. So we hope that as you enter into this week, you can really be thoughtful about what are the innovations that have come from so much change and how can you change learning in a really positive way going forward. The folks we have on today's keynote panel have taken that in stride. And you'll hear a lot about the innovations that they are making in industry around workforce development. So we're very excited to have them. But on behalf of the County Office of Ed, we are very much committed to ensuring a future without boundaries for all students. And we are excited that you're all here. Those of you who are leaving the classroom to jump on a conference at the end of the day, we thank you for continuing to be committed to this. A few housekeeping items. You can jump into any of our sessions throughout the week. The session links will go live approximately 10 minutes before the session is scheduled to begin. So you'll be able to see those Zoom links for the next session right at about 3:50, which is about when we plan to end this panel. We will be recording almost all of the sessions. We had a couple of sessions who can't be archived due to some other reasons. And so those archives will be up over the next couple of months once we get them archived properly and reposted, and we'll keep you in the loop on when those are released. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You've gotten emails from my colleague Lydia, who is your key contact for those of you who are registrants. And thank you for those of you who are speakers who've joined us today. You've probably seen emails from me, and you can always reach out if you need anything. So with all that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Sarah Burns from the San Diego Workforce Partnership, who is going to bring us into this industry side of things with our keynote panel today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jewel. And I will just add one other logistical thing. If you go to your ellipse in the top right of your screen and add a pin on our speakers, you can get a nice display of all four and add pins for all of them. So as they introduce themselves, if you're not sure, then that's a great time to do it. But thank you so much for being here. I'm the Director of Learning for the San Diego Workforce Partnership. And if you're not familiar, with a workforce development agency for the city and the county of San Diego. So do all kinds of things. We run career centers. We have lots of programs. We partner with industry. We partner with our educators to make sure that we're learning about and aware of the skills needs of our employers, and we're able to support our educators and our job seekers broadly in gaining those skills and being prepared for the workforce. So in our learning department, we partner directly with K-12 in many ways in doing professional development and helping to do things like design interactive spaces. And if there's ever anything you want to know about the workforce, the labor market, or any of those things, I'm a great person to reach out to. So always feel free. But I am honored today to introduce our panel of industry representatives that are going to share some really great information with you today about their own experience and help you to understand what's going on in industry and what are the skills and the things that we should know about what's changing or what's staying the same, or what you can take to your students when they're like, why do I even need to know this? And you say, well, I just talked to this person who's in charge of hiring people who says you need to know this. So you'll have that in your back pocket. So I would love to start by having you each introduce yourselves, share your company and your role, and share one innovative workforce development practice that you have at your company. And I will start with Angela.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angela Hansen, and I'm the Director of Total Force Management at the Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific. So yes, we are a government organization, and we're primarily a research and development organization with 5,350 civilian employees who are predominantly scientists, engineers, and information technology professionals. So our organization was used to more traditional recruiting efforts to meet our talent objectives. We focused on recent graduates who had already obtained their STEM degree. And we also worked with diversity groups such as the National Society of Black Engineers, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, our Wounded Warrior community, among others, to target our recruiting source. As a science and technology reinvention laboratory, we have special authorities that are not available to the rest of the federal government. And so we're able to operate with fewer restrictions than some of our other government colleagues are. So with my colleague, Mimi Rosato, we have partnered with the San Diego Community College District to create another pipeline of employment and use one of these authorities. So what we're doing is targeting students who are pursuing a STEM degree. And what this will do is it helps us increase our diversity because we're working with more minority serving institutions. Our student employees find meaningful employment in a mission critical field to us, as well as help mold the study of that student as they work to obtain their technical degree. So with the hands-on experience, they actually can see how their educational career path is taking them into a job path. So we've held 2 career events at San Diego City College. And in the second event, we were actually able to partner with the San Diego Cyber Center of Excellence that expanded that career event over to other employers. And through the 2 career events we held, we hired 18 students who are pursuing a STEM degree. And this partnership has also evolved to include the College of Continuing Education, where we are able to find talent with the required certifications for information technology and cyber fields. So that's just one innovation that we've been able to pursue over the last couple of years in expanding our talent pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And I'll move to Rick next.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rick Urban. I'm the COO, CFO of Quality Control Manufacturing. We are a complex aerospace and gas and oil manufacturer of components. We're in East County. We have about 100 employees. We used to have about 120. It's dropped down a little bit, and we expect it to go back up in the next 6 months to a year. From a standpoint of innovation, what we have done is we have started our own 501c3 training academy. We've done that for like the last 4 years. It's basically 16 weeks, 4 hours a day. We are now starting it back up again next month. And what we do is we train people in all aspects of manufacturing, those without any experience, quite frankly, from machining to inspection to quality to what we call non-NDT, non-destructive testing. And basically then we place those individuals in careers. We've hired about 25% of our graduates and we've placed the other 75%. We've had 99% point something placement. We've had 2 individuals that have gone through our program, about 125 or so that we didn't place. One moved to Vegas and the other one didn't want a position in manufacturing. So the program really takes maybe somebody from a community college or somebody that's from high school that was in the CTE program and enhances really on the floor. They use the current equipment. What we found is, we as an industry have to refresh our equipment. So making a $500,000 investment or $1 million investment in new manufacturing equipment is part of our business. So it's not something that some other places may be able to do. And then it's just really for us, it's a matter of managing time on that machine, whether it's when we don't need it manufacturing wise, or when we have somebody there that they can shadow, so to speak. And we've done that now, like I said, for about 5 years. It took quite a while to get off the ground, but especially for a company our size, typically it's not something that 100 employees will do, or 100, it's a company of about 100 employees. But it's been very successful, and it's really a long-term solution to a problem we had in the past, and we will always have, which is finding talented people. That's
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick, for that introduction. Veronica, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Veronica Dela Rosa. I'm the Executive Vice President of Operations at San Isidro Health. San Isidro Health is a federally qualified health center. Our mission is to serve the underserved, and we are expanding and growing in this midst of the pandemic. But one of the innovations that we're very proud of is during the pandemic, we opened up our own internal medicine residency program. We had partnered with a local hospital for a family resident and also a dental resident. But internal medicine is really an area where our aging population needs representation. And so part of that pipeline is to start building our own. So in the midst of the pandemic, we successfully launched our internal medicine residency program. And now we're at our second year. So now we have 2 cohorts here joining us in this difficult, interesting time, providing healthcare uniquely. So I won't go into the detail of anything else. I'm sure the panel will allow us to talk about our areas in focus. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Veronica. And Mike, go ahead and run it out.
Hey there, Mike Roberts. I'm the founder and executive director of Creating Coding Careers. We are a nonprofit. We run a Department of Labor registered apprenticeship program for software engineering and data engineering roles. What can I say that we do that's innovative? I think everything we do is innovative. If we're not doing something that's innovative, I'd say just generally our philosophy is to try and think like a scrappy startup and apply what we think are student-centered approaches. And if it's, again, not innovative, then we're likely to kind of pass on it and instead really focus on what's a solution out of the box that doesn't really conform to what the norms or the standards are. So I think our partnership with the San Diego Workforce Partners is a great example of that. So we started a pre-apprenticeship program funded with braided resources from both state, federal, and private philanthropy to create an income share agreement so that we have a renewable learning fund to put more and more people through a pre-apprenticeship type program. So those are the kinds of things that we're really always trying to think outside of the box and apply rather than think about it and marinate. We'd rather try something small and iterate on those pilots as we see successes and wins.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. So you see, we have a variety of industries represented. So of course, feel free to throw questions in the chat as well if you are connected with those industries or have questions about them. But we'll jump into our next question. And Angela, maybe you can start us out on this one. What has been your biggest challenge over the past 18 months, and how have you innovated to tackle it?
I'm sure it will come as no surprise that responding to the COVID-19 crisis has probably been our greatest challenge. So as an organization, while telework was always an option, it was an option in small areas, and certainly not to the extent that we needed it to be once the pandemic really hit us. So that created issues with our communication, so bandwidth with our virtual private network. We couldn't get, thousands of employees, actually hundreds of thousands of employees across the Department of the Navy to all be online at the same time through a virtual private network. And so we needed technical assistance to get those kinds of roadblocks or hurdles taken care of before we could actually become pretty productive in that telework environment. And so those connectivity issues were addressed first. And then the next challenge was with supervisors, like, are my employees doing the work? Or are they not doing the work? How do I know that they're doing the work? So it was getting the supervisors and managements comfortable with their employees, working from home, and then also getting employees comfortable working from home, because there are many challenges working remotely. And especially in the early days of the pandemic when schools were closed and working parents were home with their children while they were still trying to work. So we ended up creating virtual onboarding processes so that employees didn't have to come into the office to do a new employee orientation or to do a lot of the onboarding kinds of things that were required on in your first few days of employment. So we were able to do that and minimize the time that individuals would be required to be on site. Additionally, our managers set up one-on-ones with their employees that they held on a regular basis, at least bi-weekly. Check in with them, see how work was going, whether or not they were experiencing any kinds of challenges, either connectivity, work assignment, or even to check on them to see how they were coping with, isolation and things like that while they were home and not in the office. Because we did also experience some people who just could not, take the isolation away from their colleagues and away from things that were extremely familiar with them. Additionally, we always have a internship that comes through in the summers because we partner with the Office of Naval Research and we host Naval Research Enterprise Internship Program interns, and that's about 60 interns for the summer. Well, that had to be canceled also during the COVID, but we were able to come up with virtual internships so that those internships could continue and that program could continue. And our STEM internship program manager took these internships virtual in 2020, and it continued to evolve that program into 2021 with the incorporation of virtual communications and design thinking workshops and a professional development panel that all the summer interns were required to attend in addition to whatever projects that they were assigned to work on. And so those are some of the innovations that we've had. We still haven't cracked the nut on everything yet, and I'm sure that there's more to come. Thank you.
So Angela, if you're thinking about your most valuable employees in that time, in that transition, and solving those problems, what would you say is the top quality that they came with?
The top quality, well, the top quality is perseverance and resilience, because, I will tell you my own challenge, because I'm on the COVID Action Crisis team, and we met weekly, and it was easy to kind of get bogged down in, oh, this is never going to end. We're never going to be able to make this. And so you have to be resilient and you have to persevere in order to overcome the obstacles that are in your way. And I would say another thing would be critical thinking, making sure that you have those critical thinking and problem solving skills at your fingertips.
Yeah, that's great. So when we're thinking about the classroom and what is it that you want to be explicit about what they're learning in CTE programs, right? Those are some 3 to think about right away: perseverance, resilience, critical thinking. Thanks so much. Those are great, Angela.
Thank you.
Rick, now you're in a little bit of a different scenario. Your work is very hands-on, very in person. What did that look like for you, and how did you innovate?
Well, I mean, first of all, we never shut down. So we had to basically come up with how do we, our shop was somewhat set up that way already, just based on how we were spread out. And I mean, our biggest challenge was enhanced from our challenge that we've always had, which is finding talented people and overcoming what people believe manufacturing is. And, in the past, we had done tours with high schools and with the East County EDC. Unfortunately, we couldn't do those. We tried and, quite frankly, in my opinion, failed on trying to do virtual tours. We were not very good at that. Some of that's the industry that our typical person that wants to join our industry likes to be hands-on. It's hard to be hands-on when you're, on a virtual tour. So we're looking forward to starting those again, even if they're in smaller groups. Maybe that's part of what we should have done, is taking small groups through and spread everybody out. And we did some things where we had to, with our customers, was virtual engineering team meetings, which you can do with design of, looking at a drawing and determine if machinability and so forth. We also obviously had to enhance our supply chain area, because we had to develop secondary sources, third sources, contingency plans. We had a number of sub-tier suppliers that had very tight proximity and had to close. So we had to basically figure out what we could, where we could go, what other options do we have. And, we also made a determination to bring some of that stuff in-house. So we are going to, kind of vertically expand our manufacturing process. So instead of relying on some suppliers, we're going to expand our building to be able to bring some of that in-house. It's more of a longer term play, but probably made sense anyway, but just was highlighted with the past 18 months. I think the biggest thing for us, the challenge, again, the challenge wasn't different. It just was enhanced because we couldn't bring people through, which is how we basically helped recruit and help build our bench, so to speak. And so we're looking forward to doing that. We did reach out. We've had some, like I said, some virtual tours with some high schools, sent them some information, but it wasn't the same. So we innovated. We just didn't really do very well, in my opinion.
Well, it sounds like at least you have the perseverance and the resilience that you needed to get through there. And I'd also wonder, take this opportunity and tell us, you mentioned part of your hurdles is helping people understand like what manufacturing is and isn't. What's one of the biggest misconceptions that you want people to know?
Well, I think, let's say everybody that you close your eyes, you think of manufacturing, you think of, it's a sweaty, hot, dirty place. Well, our you can eat off our floor and you have to have it that clean. We have, our customers demand that it looks, crystal clear. It's very well organized, and it's basically, you have to be very smart in mathematics and computers. My people on the floor will tell me over and over again, I might be smart enough to run the company, but I'm too stupid to run a machine. And they're right, because I don't know how to do that. You have to be able to think in 3D. I don't have that, I don't have that skill. But the critical thinking, the problem solving, and then really the computer skills and mathematics are really what manufacturing is today. It's not what it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great thing to reinforce. And anybody out there who might be a geometry teacher, that spatial reasoning, man, that's why you need geometry. So reinforce that. Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Let's head over to Veronica. You're in healthcare, so I think some of your workplace changes we're all a little bit more familiar with. But what of those changes do you predict will become the norm once the pandemic passes?
I think one of them it's related to telehealth and virtual care. So we've always had telehealth in our behavioral health, and that has ramped up to 90%. We saw more telehealth visits in the behavioral health space than ever before. And again, the pandemic brought people to a tipping point, and that was one of those services that we already were impacted, but we saw much more. On the medical side, I think there will always be a space now for telephone and video visits. It may not be to the degree we are now. We're almost 50-50. We're 50 back in person. Some of the doctors really need to see some of those patients that had chronic conditions. And there's just some things that you need to see, but we do see a value. We saw no-show rates because of that option. So people who had transportation problems, all of the socioeconomic pieces that were keeping people away, we're noticing that with a virtual option, we're seeing better compliance. And so we're really happy because we are working around that permanency of telehealth and even wearables. So now that people are involved, with a little more connectivity and they're adapting, some of our doctors, particularly in the residency program, innovative ways to maybe connect with our patients that include technology and innovation.
I love that. So I see, the students in our schools today, their experience with technology, no matter what they go into, is going to be valuable. But, one that you might not think of at the top of the list is medicine. Yes. So do you see that as being a valuable tool as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That wearables is going to bring us to a different level. And we were really inviting the patient to be more participant in their care, right? So that's also part of that engagement, that people want to feel that they're contributing, and that this is definitely giving the space to have a partner with your patient, and that the physician and the patient are truly seen as partners. And then all the other care team that surrounds them, which I'll talk about later, or if you want me to talk about.
We'll hop to it later.
Yeah,
That's okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. And when you say wearables, just to clarify, you're talking about watches and other things,
A
heart rate
diabetic
monitors.
monitor that you can download your blood sugars. There's just all that technology that patients certainly would benefit from.
Yeah, cool. I'm also seeing like projects and CTE classes for designing cool wearables. I feel like that'd be really neat. Cool. Thank you, Veronica. I want to go back to Angela for a moment because you talked about some of your changes, and this is a hot topic in lots of places, to remote work and remote onboarding and remote internships. So broadly, what changes in the workplace do you see becoming the norm, or any of those things among them?
Yeah, so we're really still struggling with what that looks like, with what that new norm is going to look like. I think everyone thinks that we're going to get back to the way that it was or closer to that. And we know for a fact that that's just not going to happen. And so what we do know now is that post-pandemic, we do envision a lot more telework than previously, pre-pandemic. So instead of maybe a day a pay period, which is every 2 weeks, you might have 2 days a week of telework. And so we're still really trying to figure out what that looks like. And we're looking at it based on the role that the individual has within the organization. Now, we did have a lot of employees who were required to physically report to the work site. And that was because the work that they performed were in our laboratories, which are, must be done on site. And they had to come into the laboratory space. And that's where a lot of the innovation takes place. And so that is something that is really never going to go away. And in fact, we believe that we'll have more laboratories if we can reduce administrative space. And so that could mean that more employees are actually coming into work, not maybe every day, but that they will then have more lab space in which to innovate. We are looking at remote work. It is being explored. One of the challenges is that, people stay at NIWIC Pacific because of the different kinds of work that they get to do and the different projects that challenge and enhance their skills. And so there is movement all across the center. 1 year I'll work on, project A, and then the next year I'll work on project B. And so remote work is really great at balancing an individual's personal needs, but it isn't easy when it comes to ensure that that individual has the same opportunity and movement from project to project that someone on site has. And so the remote worker doesn't have access to the laboratories and therefore may not be able to transition to the kinds of career enhancing work that they would otherwise be able to do if they were on site. So we do have a team right now looking at the whole remote work aspect and providing recommendations to our leadership on how we can make that work to the largest degree that we can, given the constraints that we're in.
But how great that you're aware of and thinking actively about the equity in access to opportunity, and something that I don't know if I could say that I think all employers are having that same thought process and conversation and making sure you're supporting career development as well in an equitable way for those who are remote and on site. So I think that's a really great approach that you're taking.
Thanks.
So let's go over to Mike for a little while. We're talking about some of these skills and mindsets we hit on earlier, but from your perspective, as this workforce evolves, as we're being innovative in the future, what are those skills or mindsets that are emerging as more important? And are there any that you have seen that are becoming less important?
Sure. So I think the most important skill or mindset is a growth mindset, that and having that capacity to really be a lifelong learner, work on learning agility, because technology is evolving rapidly. And so we can't assume that we'll be able to pick up all the skills that we need in sort of one pass and then be able to leverage them for 10, 15 years. It's going to be a constant cycle of renewal of those skills. And so for folks to kind of understand and be comfortable being uncomfortable and knowing that they can absorb new information and they can learn things and that they will be able to adapt, I think gives them great resilience in what I see coming as the future of work, very much more centered around technology. I think we still, I mean, our phones, we tend to think, it's 5G, 6G, and we tend to think of the new generations, but we're going to see, very large jumps in our technical capacity with quantum computing and AI, that we're just on the cusp of trying to kind of figure out how do we integrate with advanced manufacturing, right? And so we'll see a lot more of a shift from frontline workers not having very much of a technical need to everyone having to have some capacity to be able to do some computational thinking, right? So it's a little bit more technical way of describing some of those problem solving, pattern recognition, and being able to kind of sequence and work through complex problem solving, right? So I think those are the things that are going to persist. It's interesting to think about things that are gonna go away. I think the mentality of being able to kind of take everything on and work alone and work in isolation and be super successful and not have to deal and communicate with lots of other people. The idea that a lot of people think that as we move closer to all this technology enablement, it's going to mean less human interaction. And I think it actually means there's going to be more human interaction. And so I think that skill set, the ability to collaborate well, to be able to learn how to learn as a team, right, which is a unique skill that folks can actually get together and absorb material and bring each other along these career paths and development, are really essential skills for people to be successful moving forward.
That's such an interesting point about it actually being more important to have that human contact. Because you're right, you have to build relationships remotely. That takes an advanced level of emotional intelligence and engagement to do that work. So it's not really something that's going away. Thanks for sharing that perspective. Veronica, you had wanted to talk a little bit more about some of those skills and mindsets. So what do you see that is more important and what is maybe less so?
From a more important perspective, I think we're seeing healthcare teams supporting the physician in ways that are soft skills, so to speak. So the social determinants of health are part of the Affordable Care Act when it first came, where the uninsured became insured, and there's a gap in care. And so over this time, since 2015, we've been looking at those, what they called social determinants of health, and how do we bring those, what does that touch look for the patient? How does it help the provider? And really, how does it add value to the health of that patient? So we're starting to see patient navigators, care coordinators, community health workers. I mean, those are areas that they're not in the technology world. They will be touched by technology in their jobs, but they're there to serve as the health team surrounding the patient. As we get into wearables and technology, we think of the patient in the health center and we think of the patient outside the health center. And how do we extend the care in all aspects of that patient? Housing, food insecurity, those have been huge, especially with the pandemic. We actually shifted gears and provided food pantries at some point. And again, because health has expanded to more than just the medical portion, and we're seeing it day in and day out. And those are areas, social workers, there was a time where the pendulum swang and those positions were reducing, and now we're seeing them back in and playing a very important part to the patient care. As we see acquisitions and mergers, it's a tough space in healthcare, and patient experience is another. You talked about health outcomes a lot in healthcare, but now we're talking about the patient experience within that realm of the patient's health. So there's some shifts in healthcare that are creating some unique opportunities for those patients, those people who have those soft skills and want to give in this different kind of way within healthcare. The other area, Mike, is that our agents that answer the phone, technology is starting to come into play. And so you have queuing and artificial intelligence, but you always need that touch. So we are really playing around with what does that look like for us, and how do we still make it feel inviting and warm without really having to add more agents, so to speak, as we grow and merge.
Yeah, and when you think about that customer experience, I'm just thinking about what you talked about earlier about accessibility and people who hadn't been in touch and taking advantage of telehealth. When you think about if going to the doctor is delightful, you're going to be much more inclined to do it, right?
Yes, or where we are reaching out to you and say, we haven't seen you and we need to see you, right? So we're really transforming some of that expectation that we are partnering with the patient, and we're reaching out to those patients who haven't reached out to us.
Yeah, absolutely. That proactive part is really powerful. And I will say, Jewel, I'll ask you to drop a link in the chat. Those soft skills, or what we call essential skills, are so important, but sometimes so hard to teach. So we partnered last year to create some tools to help you to do that. So Jewel's going to drop it in the chat. We have an essential skills rubric, and we have an implementation guide with some ideas of how you might use that in the classroom. And any questions, you can reach out to us. But it's also something that we're using with adults in our programs, and something we think employers, if you're interested in using that with your workforce, can be really valuable to say, like, I've got someone who I need to be a better communicator. Well, how do you break down what does that look like, and help them to reflect on, here's where I do that well, and here's where I have some room for growth. So take a look at that tool, because you heard it here first, folks. Those soft skills are really valuable for the future of the workforce. Thank you, Veronica. Let's go back to Mike. So Veronica started to tell us also about some of those future job opportunities that are growing. What about in your industry? What should students know more about?
Well, I'm a software engineer by trade, so I'm always partial to software engineers. But that's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. We're going to have plenty of roles for software engineers. The emerging roles that I think are not on as many people's radar are data engineers. And so we have a lot of this data that, and I know a lot of the, what you'll hear is that you should be a data scientist, right? Because it sounds like it's got the word science in it, so it must be, special. But that's more about like visualizing and making meaning of data that's already kind of clean and in a format that you can actually do some analysis on. But the heavy lifting is in the data engineering, is connecting all these disparate sources of information and getting them into streams of information that can then be ingested and used by AI and machine learning. And so that's still a very human process of someone having to take a holistic approach to this data as it's coming in, and clean it and prepare it for people to then use for analysis. And so we need many order of magnitude more data engineers than we need data scientists and even software engineers. And so I think that's a huge field. I think everybody recognizes, at least most businesses recognize the value of their data, right? And so I think this is an amazing opportunity for people that are interested in that and could really kind of dig in and find a happy place, because it's not everybody's superpower. Everybody's superpower is not using that reason and rational side of your brain along with your work experience and some of the more, again, holistic approach to what's wrong here, what doesn't fit in this data, and what needs to be cleaned so this can actually be useful.
Should I put on earphones? Does this bother you?
Doesn't bother me.
Same.
So I think that's one of the areas that you may not hear as much talk about, but I think it's an opportunity for lots of folks.
How does someone become a data engineer?
Great question. I think the best place to start, again, this is a software engineer, because it does give you sort of that foundation of scripting, being able to connect to these different data sources and begin to sort of ingest the data. A lot of the day-to-day work involves what we call extract, transforming, and loading the data. And that transforming piece might include cleaning the data, reorganizing the data, and storing it for more either like persistent use in the future or for some kind of analysis and making it ready. So it really is sort of the glue that ties together some of the, maybe the front end and the user experience where we're gathering the data, or the Internet of Things where the data is just being pulled in by all kinds of telemetry. and where managers and folks in the line of business are trying to make sense of that information through data science and models and all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So if you
absolutely.
start with a foundation of having good software engineering skills, it allows you to kind of build and also be able to kind of, again, use some of that artistic side, your thought process, to determine what doesn't look right here, what do we need to clean and make sure it's in a ready format for someone else to use.
Mm-hmm. And if any of you out there are familiar with the RIASEC framework, I know we have some people here who are, those conventional students that you run into, the C types, are going to be your data engineers, right? The ones who are looking and able to just dive into putting things in order and seeing those patterns. And when you talk about data cleaning, right, that might be a very broad term that doesn't make a lot of sense to people, but think of something as simple as having a list of phone numbers that are all formatted differently, right? And for something to be able to read that, a computer program to be able to read that, they all need to be in the same format, whether it's the dashes or the parentheses or no symbols in between. So it's being able to think about that consistency and how to format data from many sources, maybe. That's really interesting insight of that data engineer position. So thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Okay, I am going to go to a final question for everyone to answer. And that is, how can educators and employers work together to develop talent in our community? And you all shared some of the ways that you're doing that currently, but whether it's building upon what you're already doing or other ideas, what do you think really is most valuable there, most impactful? And, we'll go back to Angela.
Okay, so I would say to continue to participate in events like this and to establish partnerships in your regional area. And so the San Diego Workforce Partnership, the San Diego Regional Economic Development Council, and the San Diego Cyber Center of Excellence are great at getting education and employers together. And that's how NIWC Pacific got connected with the San Diego Community College District. If it hadn't been for our executive director at NAVWAR working with the San Diego Regional Economic Development Council and the San Diego Cyber Center of Excellence, we would not have established that partnership when we did. And then we have actually expanded on the partnership with these regional entities even greater than we did before, and are looking at various opportunities to work together. And we've worked on the what the curriculum should look like for specific kinds of fields, such as software engineers. So we had one of our software engineers work on that with other industry partners, and then worked with academia. So I would say that if you can do that, these connections can then allow for a discussion of issues of mutual concern, and it provides a conduit for coming up with strategies that actually help both of us.
Yeah, so talk to everybody. First
Yes.
step, right? Open up the line of communication. That's a great start. Rick, what do you say?
Well, I think, continue to do some of the things we've done in the past, which is, hopefully get the tours back going between, we worked with, we're local in East County, so we've been heavily involved with Workforce Partnership as well as the East County Economic Development Council, starting the tours back in 2010. Continue to do some of that, and probably, we did some with some of the community college and even some of the high schools. We were on some of the boards to determine what or help determine some curriculum for certain classes, and some of the where CTE happened, where schools had maybe an emphasis on manufacturing, on how we could help in that area, and that way that funneled people to us. And I think and maybe what might be helpful is obviously I said we failed on virtual tours, so I would imagine the high schools or community colleges are much better at that than we are. So helping us figure out how to do that, and maybe be the ones that actually direct the virtual tour, because we're manufacturing and we don't have the patience for it probably. So or even know the right spots. I mean, the difficulty for us is there's certain things we can't show. So how do we stage that? Somebody else is better at it than we are, obviously. So maybe that's one way we can work together.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll just call out Melanie Brandt. I see you in the participants, but Coon Valley, I think you've cracked the virtual tour from what I've seen. So maybe a connection that we can make to support our employers in East County.
Mhm.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. Veronica.
So we've partnered with a couple of the community colleges and also vocational schools. Our medical assistants are the biggest workforce in the ambulatory care here. So there are several medical assistance schools that we've partnered with, and we provide them the rotation that they need to be able to graduate from that certification. And then most likely they get an opportunity, first of all, to meet us and know us, and then we create that interest. So we've been able to be a little successful before COVID. Now we're ramping that up. With COVID, everything stopped. And we're always looking for different ways. And me sitting on the board seat now is also another way to say, how can we be creative in creating pipelines and career pathways? We're actually revising our strategic plan, and we're doing a gap 2 year, and the career pipeline is essential. And that's something we're spending some time creating so that we hire and retain in a really difficult market right now.
Yeah, maybe in that strategic plan, there's some CTE teachers in the healthcare pathway that you want to get involved. Wonderful. Thanks, Veronica. Mike, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the key ingredient for me is being open to building relationships, and in relationships that may require at some point folks make investments, right? And this is more than just a cursory, hey, we're trying to get a grant, so do you want to collaborate on this grant together? A much deeper, let's figure out how do we solve some of the big issues, right? Like articulation agreements, or how do we build an earn and learn model? And how do we start with, like, these are the right people, so let's build a relationship amongst these stakeholders, so that when we have to push, we have internal champions and decision makers that we have to sort of get everybody lined up, you've already built solid relationships within the ecosystem, that it'll be easier when that time comes to be able to say, this, everything makes sense here. We need to give it a go, start small, and scale when it makes sense. And we've had a ton of success. So that goes to, big organizations. So, we've been able to build relationships and partner with Microsoft. So it's one of the largest organizations on the face of the earth, right? And so it's been, again, building one relationship after another between educators and industry, articulation agreements between like our program and UCSD, right? And it's very rare that you have a nonprofit, Department of Labor Registered Apprenticeship program that can grant college credit, at a prestigious STEM institution. And so that happens through building relationship, right? In really helping people to understand how valuable this is, and then making sure you're connecting all the stakeholders so you can get it done. At the end of the day, there's a lot of fanciness we're all talking about, but at the end of the day, you got to have the right connections to be able to say, this makes sense, let's get it done. How do we make this move forward?
Just got to follow through and commit to it. Yeah, very true. Well, thank you so much again, everyone, for your time today, educators for joining, and to our employers. I will say, by virtue of being here, you are all now at least connected to me. So make that be your first connection to our world of industry and labor market information and career education. We're here to support in whatever way we can at the Workforce Partnership. I'm going to put my email in that chat as well. If there's anything you ever want to explore, questions you have, can't say I'll always have the answer, but usually I'll be able to connect you with someone who does. So with that, Jewel, if you have any final words in our last minute, feel free to close us out. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. This was an amazing panel, and it's always great to hear your firsthand kind of concept. I think what even stuck with me at the beginning is that perseverance and resilience. And I think we've seen that in industry, we've seen that in the classroom. And those are lifelong skills that allow our students to be successful as they develop those. So I appreciate your input in this. And Rick, some of our team has been going out to do some tours at industry partners, and we'll bring the cameras and everything. So I think that might be a next step for some of our folks to connect with you and get a video taken if you're up for that.
Sounds good.
Excellent. All right, at the end of every session, we are also going to be putting up a certificate. Those of you who are potentially getting paid to join us today, or professional learning credits in your district, all you need to do is take a screenshot of this slide for verification, and that shows that you attended on this day at 3 p.m. And so at the end of each session this week, we will post one of these for you to take a screenshot of, or a little selfie with your phone right now.